This is the HPC Trailblazer Pro, and for those not already in the know, HPC stands for high power cycles, and with this bike, well, yeah, that checks out. This thing has a lot of power for an eMTB, but there's much more to it than just that. Let's talk about it all in today's review. Hey everybody, I'm Griffin and welcome to Electric Bike Report, your #1 source for e-bike testing and analysis. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can keep up with each bike that goes into our testing database. Now, the Trailblazer Pro is pretty different from a lot of other eMTBs that we've seen, and I think it showcases a pretty clear personality for people that want a rugged eMTB that can go fast. That largely revolves around its blazing motor capabilities and the fact that it's somewhat of a tweener bike between trail and enduro styling. I guess we could call it an aggressive trail bike, with further options to enhance that aggressive edge via some upgrades. There is a regular Trailblazer option, but today we're going to be focusing on the Pro since that's the one that we were sent for testing. Now, on the Pro model, you build around a carbon frame. There are 3 different sizes to pick from. Now, our test bike was a large and weighed 55.3 pounds, but bear in mind that some of that weight is due to the upgrades we have on this bike that I will detail as we go. Let's quickly talk about the Geo, but just remember some things may slightly vary depending on your frame size. Our bike's head tube angle is 64.9 degrees, while the seat tube angle is 74.5 degrees. The reach is 470 millimeters, while the stack height is 632 mil. The chainstay length was 460 millimeters, which we felt it was a smidge long. It helped the smooth and stable feeling that the bike has for sure, but we felt the bike could have been a bit more agile if it were a little bit shorter. The suspension is a 160/155 setup from DVO. There is the Diamond D1 air fork up front, while the rear shock is the Topaz 2 Generation 3. Now, our drivetrain was the standard SRAM EX1 8-speed, and it has a 11 to 48 tooth range from the group set, and it's paired with a 38 tooth chainring. And you can choose to upgrade the drivetrain to a 14-speed roll-off internally geared hub too if you'd like. The wheels feature Spank Uzi Trail 395 Plus rims, SRAM 900 hubs, and Maxxis Minion tires. It's a 27.5 by 2.8 inch tire for both the front and the rear. Now, the brakes on the bike are the Magura MT7s. They are a 4-piston hydraulic with 203mm rotors front and rear. The saddle is the Volt from WTB. It's connected with an SDG Tellus dropper post. Our bike had 125mm of travel. We found that to be a little on the short side, but you get 150mm on the extra large frame. The handlebar is a carbon bar from Renthal, 800mm wide with a 25mm rise. Now, that's a lot of great parts, which is what you'd hope for since it does have a premium price tag. The Pro model starts at $9,000 and goes up from there if you choose to upgrade either the motor, battery, charger, or drivetrain, or if you spring for the lighting system too. But now that we've covered most of the basics of what you get, let's dive in further for a closer look at the motor and battery. The Bafang M600 motor is a fitting choice on this bike given the brand's name. It definitely counts as being a high-powered, it can provide a boost with the best of them. Now, our tester was the 750 watt option. However, if you're all about maxing out a bike's muscle, you can order a 1200 or even an 1800 watt version. That last one can reach a max of 40 miles per hour. Just please make sure you familiarize yourself with where that type of stuff is legal to ride, as it will exclude you from a lot of trails. But let's go back to our motor. In addition to the 750 watts, it also cranks out 100 Newton meters of torque. That makes climbing a relatively easy task on this. In the beginning, I was skeptical about the 8-speed drivetrain, but in all honesty, with how much motor power this thing spits out, you really don't need a ton of gearing options. The setup as a whole felt pretty appropriate and worked dependably. The motor has 5 different PAS settings, and all of them have pretty impressive starting kicks. The motor makes some discernible noise, but for how hard it pushes, I would have expected it to be even louder. So to be honest, with all things relative, I thought it was not too noisy. Now, given the powerful nature of the motor, I think it will appeal to speed demons and people with motorbike backgrounds. Advanced mountain bikers will love how easily you can ramp up speed before sailing off a jump. Our riders, who got the most rowdy on the trails, had a blast just blazing ahead into whatever they could find to hop off of. The battery standard option is 10.5 amp hours. Our tester had the upgraded 15 amp hour option, while a 17.5 amp hour option is also available. I think my largest piece of advice would be to plan ahead where battery is concerned. Powerful motors draw energy from batteries the quickest, so if you're the type that leans into higher PAS usage, I'd recommend looking at upgrading the battery. All right, let's take a look at the range that you can get on the Trailblazer Pro. Now note that each rider will move through assist modes as they feel they need to, and that can lead to more or less range depending on how much power you're pushing. Now for the purposes of our tests, we do the whole ride in boost mode to help establish a floor value for the battery's mileage. Now, our tester got the bike to go a total of 22.7 miles off of our 15 amp hour battery. That included climbing 2,247 feet while averaging 13.4 miles per hour over 1 hour and 42 minutes of riding. Not a bad result at all, especially since our test course is a rocky and technical ride. It gives the motor ample opportunity to help move the rider. And obviously, if we weren't holding to the highest level of assist for the whole time, you can extend that with easing up on motor power. In terms of its range, I think that the result is solid. You have to remember, there are sprinters and there are marathon runners. This one is more like the former. It'll go really hard, but not as far as others. One big takeaway we picked up when doing these longer rides was just how much fun there was going downhill. The suspension was great, and our team of testers enjoyed jumping around on this thing and felt like we could keep going downhill all day long. To see what this motor was made of, we put it through 2 different hill tests. The first one is on our local paved paths at a charming hill known as Hellhole. It is 1/3 of a mile long and has a 12% average grade. Then after that, we put the Trailblazer Pro in its proper environment and took it up to our Water Tower hill climb to see how well it does in the dirt. I'll let Justin take it from here to show you how it went.
All right, we are out on Hellhole on the HPC Trailblazer, which I've been very excited and interested to test with this Bafang M600 mid-drive motor. It's a pretty darn lightweight eMTB that feels super light when you're pedaling, and the motor feels very powerful. So we're gonna see how this goes. Kind of up through that section. I'm not having to pedal much, I gotta be honest. I'm on 13, 14 miles per hour, was carrying 12 to 13 through that steep section. I'll let you listen through here. So you do hear that noise from the motor, especially when I get the cadence higher, but it feels very powerful. It was 14 miles, 15 miles an hour through that last pitchy section. I gotta say, usually I have to push a little bit more. I am not having to push much on this. I have a feeling we're gonna have a really good time score-wise. Let's go to the tape and check it out. All right, we are out doing the water tower test on the HPC Trailblazer, which has this Bafang M600 motor, 750 watts, that feels very peppy. This did really well on Hellhole, so we'll see how it translates out here on this, you know, kind of double track over a little bit slightly longer climb. But I'll say kind of from the get-go, you know, as motors go in terms of do they feel natural, smooth, to powerful and peppy, this one's all the way over to the powerful and peppy side. So yeah, we'll hit this. I'll ride for a minute or two, and then I'll come back and give you some commentary on kind of what my thoughts are. Yeah, so we'll see what these results come out to be. But the motor really does just feel very punchy, very powerful. I think it's going to be pretty good. I'll also say, like, it still helps if you're in the right climbing gear, but even if you're slightly in the wrong gear, I feel like this gives you some punch. So it's not as natural feeling as some of the other motors, but it's fun. Takes a minute to get used to. And I mean, I've got a little bit of wind, sorry for that noise. I'm pedaling just like I am on all these other tests. And this thing's just cruising up here. I mean, there's been times where I've been, you know, over 20 miles an hour and the motor's kicking off because I hit above that 20. So I'm expecting a pretty good result. It at least feels good. So let's go to the take and see how it did.
Okay, up to this point in the review, I've said the word powerful or something like it several times, and here's where the data backs that up. At our beloved Hellhole Trail, this bike got up to the top in just 1 minute and 8 seconds to the tune of 16 miles per hour. That is the 23rd fastest time ever since we made the switch to Justin as our dedicated hill tester, and he is nearly 200 bikes in at this point. Now, at the risk of sounding like a game show host, but wait, there's more. If we filter by mid-drives, this bike is holding down the bronze medal on the podium, and if we filter by eMTBs, it's actually holding onto the gold. Now, as expected, that translated to the water tower climb as well. On that one, it climbed to the top in 3 minutes and 13 seconds. Now, this is a new test that we just recently implemented for eMTBs, and the data set isn't as large as Hellhole's, but that time is still beating out second place by a comfortable 22 seconds. And that crowd includes bikes from the likes of Specialized and Orbea. Now granted, those brands prioritize seamless power distribution more than pure speed like the HPC does, but I think you get my point. This motor on the Trailblazer Pro is a different breed and for riders who want lots of power.
All right, so we're out on the trail on the HPC Trailblazer. So just wanted to give you guys a little first look on how the motor sounds in each of the modes. It's, as we've talked about, a very powerful motor, one of the most powerful in the eMTB market right now. So it's got 5 different modes. Well, I guess 6 if you count off, which I'll just do that right now. We'll just put it down to off. It pedals pretty natural. I mean, I'm on a pretty flat trail right now, but as first impressions go, it doesn't feel like there's any drag pedaling with the motor off. Start going a little bit uphill here, but yeah, it feels good. Definitely is not something you'd probably want to do for an extended period of time with the motor off, but it's certainly doable. So okay, we'll put it up into eco mode, which is their lowest power setting. You can kind of hear the motor a little bit there. It's not real loud. Pretty nice. Okay. As you can see, I mean, we're on a flat trail here, but it does. Let's go back. Next power setting up, which is on the display, has a T. So I'm not sure what that stands for. The other one had an E. I'm assuming it's a eco mode, and then the T is for trail. Not a whole lot louder. I'll tell you one thing though, it's a whole lot faster. So that's trail mode. Okay, let's go to the next one up, which is, I believe, sport. Oh, I just looked down and I must have bumped the power setting because it's back down to eco. So go trail, now sport. Okay, now the next one up is, I believe, Sport Plus. And then we go boost. You can definitely hear the motor. It's a little louder when you go to boost. Yeah, I'd say as far as the noise on pedaling, it's almost the same with Eco Trail and Sport, even Sport Plus. I couldn't tell much of a difference in the motor noise. Once you go to boost, you can hear it a little bit more. You definitely know that it's a little bit louder. But definitely, as far as comparing motor noise to some of the other systems that we've been testing, I would say as far as the pitch goes, it's very similar to the Bosch CX motor as far as the pitch, but I would say it's quieter. A little bit quieter than that one, so. Okay, we're riding up this in sport mode, and one of the things I've noticed is in sport mode, you definitely feel a bit of overrun from the motor. Coming up here, there's going to be a couple of ledges, like right here. Huh, wow. Yeah, I took probably one pedal stroke less than I normally would on that, and the overrun of the motor kept the momentum going on the bike. So when I did start pedaling again, it's almost like I had never let off the pedals. So the overrun of the motor kept going long enough that when I started pedaling, just, yeah, kept going. Cool. Okay, see how it does here in wrong gear. One of the things I've noticed coming down so far, I don't know if you can hear it on the video, but there's a rattle from the motor. Not sure if that's coming through on the audio or not, but again, I would compare it, that noise, to the rattle on the Bosch CX motor, and probably about the same amount of noise. One of the things that I find with this bike is, well, two things. It's It's got a pretty long chainstay at 460, which does make that nice for really steep climbs, as well as holding the bike pretty stable on descents. But when you're going into like tight turns, I've had a few of those where you can feel the length of the rear end of the bike, and it makes it, you have to kind of compensate for that with how you ride, how you maneuver. Not going to be able to make those tight turns quite as tight. Something else that I've noticed when going downhill on this bike is that this bike is the wheel size on this is 27.5 front and rear. So when you hit really rough parts of trail, kind of like what I was just going down, when you hit that stuff going at speed downhill, yeah, it does seem to bog down the front of the bike a little bit. Now it's kind of a two-edged sword. I mean, it's nice to have a 27.5 wheel on the front because you're going to get some sharper handling, but at the same time, when you do get riding on some of that fast rough trail, it just doesn't seem to roll and soak stuff up quite as good as like a 29 inch front wheel. I would actually be really interested to take this bike and put a 29 inch front wheel. I think it would actually ride really, really well. It would slacken it out a bit. It would raise the bottom bracket just a hair. But if you don't have trails that are pretty rough that you're riding, I don't know if I would do that, because putting that 29 inch front wheel on is going to slow down the handling just a little bit more, which, you know, a bike with a 460 mil chainstay is already a little bit more sluggish in the turns. Anyway, it would be something fun to play around with and experiment with. Okay, we're gonna go down some drops and some downhill here for just a minute, but another thing that I've noticed is where this is the power mode changer and the on-off button, but how they've situated the dropper post in relation to the power mode. It's like I have to try and avoid the power button in order to hit the dropper. So I would probably switch those two around so that you got your power mode closer up on the handlebars and your dropper close here, so you're not hitting one when you mean to hit the other one. So other than that, though, this bike is actually really fun to ride. Specs on it are sweet. You've got these Magura brakes, that are absolutely phenomenal. Renthal carbon bar, I mean, top of the line DVO suspension, really adjustable, super fun bike. Man, it's been a minute since I rode a bike that was 27.5 front and rear. It definitely takes some getting used to. A lot of bikes today are either 29 full or a mixed wheel setup with a 29 front, 27.5 back. But definitely it makes it more maneuverable, but it almost feels a little bit unbalanced because you've got your long chainstay that keeps your back end really stable, but then when you do come across something that's rowdy or big or bigger downhill with drops or jumps, you really got to be aware of how you handle the front end of the bike. It just seems to be a little bit more unnerving than riding a bike with a 29 inch front wheel. I'd say if you're used to that, or if you like that fat feel, like this is the bike for you. If you don't ride stuff that's very steep or technical, this would be a really fun bike. Okay, we'll test out how the suspension feels on these drops. So far, really good. Man, I really would be curious to see how this bike would handle the 29-inch front wheel, because, you know, with all the suspension this bike has, man, it'd be pretty fun to see what it can do with a little more slackened head angle and a little higher rolling speed. Something that I really like about this bike, and I don't know if it's even still available. We'll do some research and get back to you guys on this. But they spec'd this bike with the SRAM EX1 drivetrain. This is a drivetrain specifically designed for e-bikes. It is an 11 to 48 tooth cassette, so it still gives you a lot of range. Quite frankly, rarely do you need a large cassette bigger than 48. You know, the biggest ones now are coming 51 and 52. Yeah, on an e-bike 48, you really can't even tell the difference. You'll be able to get more performance changes by changing the chain ring size than you would the largest or smallest cassette cog. But on that EX1 cassette, there's only 8 gears. Again, I think it's perfect. You don't necessarily need a full 12 speed cassette on an e-bike. You don't need to find that perfect cadence to get you up a hill, or to, you know, put your heart rate at the right zone you'd like it during a long climb. The jumps between each of the cogs, or each of the cassette sizes, is really normal. It doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel like one shifts differently than the others. So again, we'll do some more research, see if this EX1 cassette was just a dinosaur that's no longer around. And my heck, I would say if it's outdated, I would love to see somebody bring something like that back for e-bikes. Okay, we're just climbing up the last little bit of trail to the top. We are in eco mode here, and I was hoping to get out of the wind a little bit, so hopefully the camera can pick up the motor noise. Again, this is eco, so we'll pick it up to trail. Sport Plus, and Turbo. Okay, now back to trail. So I've noticed that I'm not so sure that the motor noise has as much to do with which mode you're in as it does the cadence in that mode. So the higher your pedals are moving, the higher the noise, which again is not too bad. These Maxxis 2.8-inch tires are so grippy. Man, they do an amazing job. One of the things that is noticeable on e-bikes, and I think more aware of this today because of the circumstances, but normally leaving the ground on a regular bike, if you have a crosswind, man, it can get sketchy. And today we have a pretty good crosswind coming down this trail, and you hardly even notice it. I mean, sometimes you'll notice it slow you down, but you don't notice your bike being blown out from underneath of you in quite the same way. Now, if you're going, you know, I wouldn't go out and hit 15 or 20 foot gaps with a crosswind with any bike, but like right there, there's a little booter. I didn't go off of it very hard, but all these little things, little pops and jumps that you find on a lot of trail systems, with a crosswind, you can get really blown around. But man, this bike holds its line so well. Yeah. Man, long chainstays definitely have their place. I know that going off little kickers and even bigger jumps with a shorter chainstay, it does seem to have a tendency to buck you a little bit easier if you're not used to it and know how to have your suspension set up correctly. Whereas this bike, with a longer chainstay, there's zero buck. I mean, you can just send it and know that you're just gonna fly straight. or whichever direction you want to go in. And then of course, that rear end is just so stable when you're on the ground going downhill. Oh yeah. Some of those little rollers on a bike with a shorter chainstay definitely kick you up a little bit. And this thing just rolls right off. Okay, just back to the parking lot from our ride. When I started the ride, I had 80%, exactly 80% battery. And we did about 12 miles with about 1,200 feet, actually closer to 1,400 feet of climbing. And we're just finishing up the ride, and we are at 18% battery left. So I think from the range test, you know, some of the numbers will show that this bike, with that really super powerful Bafang motor, is going to have less range. I mean, it's going to get you there faster, but it's just not going to be able to go quite as long. So anyway, guys, thanks for coming along.
Okay, so instead of totally rehashing what Bryce said, I'm just going to try to summarize all of the thoughts of our riders who have ridden the HPC as far as its quality goes. Now, this thing definitely rips, and it is surprisingly fun to hop around on, and the suspension was just overall great. We could go downhill on this thing all day and be happy. The motor can make even gnarlier sections that might seem intimidating, doable and fun. Now, in some respects, the motor might be too much for less experienced riders. There's a lot of overrun on the motor, which is great if you know what to do with it, but we could see that being too much for a less experienced rider climbing something that's overly technical. If you are sticking to greens and blue trails though, then less experienced riders should be just fine. And those with a little more experience under their belt will definitely love how to use it. There are a couple of things we'd add on the wish list for changes though. For chunkier riding like what we experienced here on our local southern Utah trails, a mixed wheel pairing would have been nice to be able to order. A 29 in the front is an upgrade we would likely want to make. Also, the seat dropper post was a bit on the small side. It worked just fine, but a little more travel to it for a large frame would have been nice. We typically expect a 150 mil on large frames and maybe even 175 on the extra large ones. At the end of the day though, this is a bike that will speak really well to a certain crowd. Adrenaline junkies will like the speed, and the overall setup is great for all sorts of riding. This bike was frankly just fun to ride around on. The main draw was pretty evident from the get-go. It is every bit a high-powered cycle, but the more time I spent with it, the more I enjoyed other aspects of it. It was comfortable, it was versatile, and it could enable me to do a lot of hard climbs I might have needed a few practices on otherwise. HPC is definitely carving out a niche here, since this bike feels like it's built by people who like going fast for people who want to go fast. In some ways, this lacks a certain polish to it that we often see on bikes in this price range, but that might be the point. You don't blaze trails in a clean manner, you just blaze them. But now I am curious what you think. What are your thoughts on the HPC Trailblazer Pro? Let us know in the comments down below. And of course, you can always support us by checking out the pricing link and the link to the written review in the video description. That goes a long way to helping us test out more bikes. I'm Griffin with Electric Bike Report, and I will see you on the next review.